the media has always been the defining parameter for sport. Now, what you call media now has been influenced by the advent of the internet and the differentiation in media platforms.
This is Advertising in Africa with Dele Odugbemi on Africa Business Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Advertising in Africa with me, Dele Odugbemi. Today I have with me a friend who's become my sister. We're family now, Nkechi. There's no place you're running to. We have known each other quite a while, and I thought, there's another person I would want to have a session like this with, but her, because of her knowledge of experience, which she will share with everyone in a moment. So, Nkechi, first, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dele. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, we're family now. Been around. So in fact, I can't remember the time I didn't know you. So it's a great pleasure to have this conversation.
Thanks so much for making time. So today we will be talking about the intersection between media and sport. Nkechi is a known sport. Well, let's take it from the professional description, which will be, I said she will introduce herself, but a sports enthusiast that had grown into sport business. So when I speak to her, I find easily she crosses across both sides. First, she is a sport fan, and then the business of sport is something she's built a career on. So let me not steal the thunder, Nkechi. Please just introduce yourself now and give us your background.
Well, Dele, you're quite correct. My first degree is in chemistry. People find that very strange. And then I have an MBA. But I've always been a sports person. I played sports in secondary school, played hockey, basketball, tennis, netball, volleyball, you name it, I played it. We were fortunate in Queen's College that we had facilities. So I was able to indulge the passion I had for sport. Took it on to Unilag, where I represented this university as well. And then came out of Unilag, went back, did a master's in business admin, and then went into marketing. And a couple of friends one day just said, look, sometime in the 90s, said, look, why are you bothering to struggle with earning a living in something that you may not love? Why don't you go to sports that you find you love? You will pay somebody to allow you to do it and see what you could do. So I got into sports. It was very easy. I had been a player. I played for Lagos State, played for Nigeria, played squash, got the medals. And so it was easy to become an administrator, served on the board of the Squash Federation and a few other places, and, take the next step to selling sport, marketing sport to corporate organizations, and seeing the difficulties in them raising funds for sponsorship for different sports federations or different sports events. So from player to administrator to management, we began to see what the issues are. And a few years later, started trying. By 2010, it was clear that if we didn't have a paradigm shift, we would not ever be able to build the business, the industry. So we started working, and I think that's when we all got interested in seeing that sport is clearly identified as a business. And so the last 10 years have been spent really in what I would call the developmental phase of my life. And I identify myself as a sports development and management expert now. I'm more interested in the development of that sector as an industry. And we've pushed towards that by finally getting ourselves the sports industry policy awaiting approval. Now you would ask, what's the difference between the sports policy and the sports industry policy? The word industry in it is actually the difference. Okay. So more than 30 years of my life have been spent doing this. And I think you can testify to the various trenches we've been in, and how far we've come. Yeah.
It's those trenches that made me really realize that we need to have this conversation publicly. And the interest is actually also stemming from the fact that, as you said, sport is a business, and you had used the last decade or so about articulating how that can benefit Nigeria. And just as that is about to take off now in some form or the other once it's ratified, we have now had a pandemic. And during, the last 2 years or so, I've been applying my mind to sports that is almost by definition a spectator-related event. That what made sport what we know it to be as being the fans that go to the stadium, essentially.
Yes.
But that for many decades, what had been sustaining it had been the media dimension. There is income generated by clubs, by national teams, by fans going in, ticket sales and so on, hospitality and all of that. But a lot of when you're talking about the millions FIFA sell its properties and all of those kind of things, the media is the money, obviously. But that if you look at the last 2 years, particularly in the period when sports had to run without spectators, then you begin to even now see the value of media. And that's on two sides. That is, we were all stuck in our houses and we're almost glad there was some form of entertainment that, we could view and not need to go out. But also is that those professionals who needed to earn a living, who couldn't, by the nature of what the pandemic was, draw in crowds, the media now became the alternative source, if you think about it. The fact that the crowds couldn't come, but yet we could see it on television, they could still afford to pay them those salaries, and some clubs have now run into trouble as a result of all of that. So that in the sport policy that you are about to put out there, in what way is the media woven into it in now recognizing the importance it has in the sports business itself? Just in a nutshell, I know you can't go into all the detail, but just that
Yes, the media has always been the defining parameter for sport. Now, what you call media now has been influenced by the advent of the internet and the differentiation in media platforms. But if you remember way back when, the medium for disseminating sport, first and foremost, was, radio and newspaper. Yeah. Which is why newspapers used to have like 8-9 pages, back pages, just to be able to put all that content in there, right? Yeah. And radio used to be how we used to hear. Then television came and changed the dynamic once again. We could now see on TV those things we were imagining when two commentators were speaking on radio. And the things we're imagining when we're reading 8-10 pages of pull-out in the newspapers and all. So television in the 50s and 60s redefined sport. Now the internet has even gone one step further by creating numerous platforms for you to be able to follow your passion at any level you want. If I want to follow a club, I can follow the club. If I want to follow a particular player in that club, then I can follow him on social media, his social media handles and all. If I want to get behind the scenes stories, I get that. And so during the pandemic, we were opportuned to now follow even how as heroes, as sports heroes and all, we're coping with the pandemic. It made for very interesting reading. So I think that the opportunities, these are some of the things we try to capture in the policy, that the advent of the internet has provided numerous opportunities for even niche sports to be able to reach a target audience. So if you're a badminton player, the Badminton Federation could have its own platform and reach maybe 50 million, 20 million, 10 million, 5 million people and grow its fan base and grow its revenues. So the internet has enabled us to leverage the nexus between sport and entertainment even more than we imagined. I read some numbers today, Dele, of what is possible in terms of viewership, global viewership, or, what kind of revenues that such viewership is driving. And I'm totally amazed that here on the Nigerian scene, we can't even begin to understand what we're sitting on. But it's becoming a bit clearer to quite a few discerning people. And I think we're going to find that the opportunities thrown up by media platforms that exist now and are going to exist in future, are limitless, so to speak.
I think the shift from what you've always said at the time when the policy was being developed was this bit about where sport need to move from a participation medal perspective to an ecosystem, if you like, where, there's this holistic look of it, not just in terms of the brilliance of the athletes, which ought to be celebrated, and there's no problem with that. But that when you think ecosystem, then you're thinking tourism, you're thinking of the number of people that go to watch hospitality, number of people that go to watch Formula One around the world, number of people preparing to go see the World Cup in Qatar, how that in itself brings money into the economy and all of that. So in applying my mind to that, again, because the pandemic is such a disruptor, there is just so much in sport that almost has a physical movement tied to it. Athletes moving from one location to the other, playing tournaments, fans following them, all of that. And then now there's a lot more of country ban, travel ban. We don't know how long all of this kind of, let's say, disruption we've had in our public health situation will impact that. Is this still okay that in coming up with sport policy, and this is not just about the Nigeria situation, it will be true about other developing markets, that to just assume status quo will remain, that the world will still always be in this state where you are able to move around easily, you are able to, or is this a pause moment for us to actually also consider the possibility that there might be a lot more indoor need? And if that, sports as we know it might itself need to evolve into one where it is not as widespread and as international as it is today, because what we have now is one model of international relations, people traveling across borders and all that. What happens when travel bans exist and we no longer can go watch our national team in another part? That possibility is there, which in my view still makes media even more important, because media now become the way of us getting there without getting there.
Okay. So to answer your question, right, it's very simple. So we know, we just take what we saw, the version of sport we saw when there was lockdown, nobody allowed in the stadiums, no traveling, and the version of sport we see now and we saw before lockdown. And what my mind tells me is that we're not going to go back to that lockdown vision. You see, sport is pure unscripted drama. If we put it behind closed doors and everything, it begins to approach reality show. Reality shows came about because they wanted to come as close to sport, the drama associated with sport and its unscripted nature. So they tried, that's why the reality shows came about. But there is nothing like sport. So we saw behind closed doors, and it was a pale imitation of the people in the stadiums. And we're seeing people in the stadiums, we're seeing those emotions. Even those of us watching far from the stadiums are seeing a different product. So my mind tells me there will always be a way for sports to rise above whatever limitations. Having said that, though, if you are going to lay claim to having 700 million fans globally, there is no way you are going to put 700 million people inside one stadium. What you need the stadium for is to be able to deliver the best product possible to those watching from home. So the media is even more important now than it was before and during the pandemic. The media is going to enable us to do the things we couldn't do. I'll give you an example. Esport. You see people playing tournaments without physically being present in a room. They're sitting miles away from each other, right? And they're playing a tournament. And you also see people watching that tournament miles away from the either party playing. So that's one version we're going to find. And esports is growing.
Yeah.
Esports is growing because it appeals to a demographic who are very comfortable with remote viewing and remote
the millennials, yes.
Yes, the millennials. But at the same time, esports people are looking for a way, are beginning to find that they need some element of physical presence. I was at an esports conference 2 weeks ago here in Lagos, and that came up, that there must be some element of touchy-feely atmosphere. So sport is unique. In all human endeavor, sport is unique. And it is that very unique nature that we leverage in every single area, be it tourism, media, hospitality, capacity. It's the unique nature of sport that we all come. So I can't tell you that we are ever going to have a situation where nobody is in the stadium. I can tell you for free that it's not going to happen. But how much of it is going to happen, that virtual viewing and all, we're already doing virtual viewing anyway.
Yeah. the one word that's come out of, I think as a buzzword that's come out of the pandemic, apart from remote working, is hybrid as a way forward. Some sort of combination of the present and the past as a way of navigating the future. So that's perhaps what you're alluding to, that there is the unique nature that sports has, that the crowd will always be, but that what perhaps the pandemic has revealed is even more so, it was clear to maybe sports business people like yourself, but even more so that it's the media that is the money. So that the role the media plays is just really a lot clearer. Now, when you're telling clubs about what their ecosystem is and, how they need to manage their media properties, the whole idea of that is only X number of people can come to the stadium. And when you want to monetize the properties you have to think of the ecosystem outside of that stadium. Because that
in larger proportions to that X.
Yeah.
In larger proportions.
We've always had the argument also about how American basketball that is shown to a smaller audience has, more revenue than the totality of soccer that is global.
Yeah.
Just as an example of when you don't maximize your audience. Whereas there's, fewer teams, more focused tournament, but virtually every aspect of, what the industry is monetized, and therefore the ability to generate income is a lot better. And I think that's just the lesson I've learned. A lot of that, again, coming from media, but I'm surely with NBA, it's a lot more than that. It's merchandising. I mean, that's another level. And soccer just hasn't been able to replicate that because it's a more popular sport. There is almost a people dimension to it, for the
social function.
A social function.
A social function attached to it.
Yeah. And it goes back to the point about, because sport had originated from this participation point of view, it's been hard for a lot of people to have that mental shift of it actually really is a business. So the NBA is the example of business. But we still talk about athletic performance. You talk about a LeBron. You still talk about the quality of play. But obviously, this is a well-managed business that, just has a different result.
So the thing is, the NBA came about to deploy business models towards managing a sport. FIFA and football came about to use sport to achieve social
cohesion
cohesion.
Yeah.
So FIFA is now trying to bring business models towards running football, and is running into problems because of the regulatory structure that it has that is more geared towards delivering social benefits. social benefits and community benefits. So its regulatory structure is not fit for purpose to run football from a business perspective. Yes, they are making money, but they could make humongous amounts more. But their regulatory structure doesn't. Of basketball, the NBA, the regulatory structure is purely to maximize this sport as a business. So you start off with the media, that you must reach as many people as possible, and to reach them with the right content, which is where the NBA has a department fully devoted to creating content. It took FIFA years to have that. Even their archival material, their camera, their material was never set up like that. So back to how it, in the light of the pandemic, where what's going to happen, particularly over the last few years, what we're seeing is moneyed people. And when I say moneyed people, I mean things like private equity, venture capitalists, the billionaires and all. Yes. Entering sports with a view to now focusing less on the participation for social development and more on the participation to deliver business benefits, business and brand benefits. So we're seeing, for example, in tennis, International Capital, CVC partners taking over tennis, inject money and take it over and restructure WTA and the ATP to deliver more content, better content across its media channels. All of this is being driven by media. Every single thing is being driven by media to deliver to different audiences what they are looking for. So there's going to be a lot of fragmentation of what you see. So if I want to watch Serena, for example, and I don't want to watch Simona Halep, there will be a channel that will be showing me Serena versus who. So I do not have to wait for Simona's match to end before Serena's match is shown, all of those kind of things. Ditto, they've moved over to volleyball. And we're now beginning to see all of these movements of money. Even in football, we're suddenly seeing billionaires buying clubs in England, in Spain, in this, and all of that is with a view to now coming to use the power of the media platforms to deliver content to a global media thirsty audience, sports crazy, sports passionate audience. That's so the media really has now come front and center of the conversation.
That a very interesting dynamic, which is basically that if you look at how a Sky is credited for the Premier League and the rejuvenation and kind of making it the sport property that it today is, it's Sky that gets that credit. Of course, the clubs coming together to form the Premier League also get the credit, but to turn into a media property has been more a Sky thing. American style, number of cameras, so that it's not your Saturday afternoon boring a league game anymore, then it became a media property. There are lots of properties you could go down the road like that you could tie to a broadcast network. Now that media has now fragmented, that is now almost like the way you have streaming, you have that now in a multidimensional, whether we're on a podcast now, there's streaming of content on Netflix. So there are multiple dimensions. Now, how do you see that playing out when we are now moving from the era of the networks that used to dominate how sport property get monetized? Now that is more, I think the word is more relatively fragmented. How do you see that evolving?
You see, they say the more things change, the more they remain the same. So you had broadcast networks. What you have now is big data companies. So it's now become a data function. So the big data companies, I like to call them, the oil industry had the 7 sisters. So I like to call the big data companies the 7 sisters too. So you've got the Amazons, you've got Facebook, you've got, those, for want of a better word, the local parlance, you say, those Yami Oshoronga, also known as
Which is...
They control everything. Which, okay, Macbeth's 3 witches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Macbeth's 3 witches, but inside this time there are 7 witches. So they control everything. Okay. And they've understood that the sports space.
I need to put a time limit on your response though, because we just have 5 minutes left for the show. Yeah.
In a nutshell, broadcast was it before, now is data companies. And it's about the number of people you can aggregate in one place, about the communities that you can build.
Yeah.
And so when they have communities of 2 billion, then they can throw down the money.
Yes.
And they can acquire those rights, and then they can further fragment along their own platform. So you're going to see all these numerous platforms actually all coming, we've already seen Facebook taking over. Instagram, WhatsApp. Yeah. So that's what we're going to find. So that's why I said the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's limitless. You're right. We would think like we've entered another era. Now we're in the era of digital platforms and streaming. But yet, because of the importance of media to the sports ecosystem, even as media gets more fragmented, all that changes is its use is different. You get more specialized, you get tennis channels, you get football channels, you get more. So what you more than likely would get is even closer access than, because the closer you get, the more you uncover money-making opportunities, and you become, as a Serena fan, you have opportunities to follow her, to do, so it's quite multidimensional.
Different things across different channels.
To use the Facebook channels, it's now a metaverse.
Channels are owned.
Yes,
exactly.
It's now a metaverse.
But the channels are owned. Go and check that. At the end of the day, you find 7, just like the broadcast people, 7, 8 people owning everything.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we could talk about this forever if we had
2 hours.
if we had the time. But Nkechi, thank you so much for being able to give us your perspective on how this is all evolving. It's obviously a live, ongoing subject, so I'm sure there's another time that we'll drag you into the studio to have another session like this. But for now, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Dele. Thank you for having me.
All right. So if anyone wants to follow you, could you give us like sports-related handles they can track you on that can follow some of your perspective?
Well, it's on LinkedIn. They can find me on LinkedIn.
All right.
They can also find me on Facebook.
What's your detail on LinkedIn? How do they find Nkechi Obi?
The Facebook is Nkechi Obi. Yes.
And LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is Nkechi Obi as well. Okay. And then on Instagram is Nkechi__Obi.
Great. And me, you can find me on LinkedIn as Dele Odubemi. Nkechi, thank you so much. Looking forward to having you with us again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dele.
Bye.